Smart people understand that boundaries aren't just barriers to keep people out. They're standards that protect your values, your peace, and your purpose. They don't set boundaries to offend others or push them away. They set boundaries to protect what truly matters: their energy, their time, and their integrity. When toxic people enter the scene, those who manipulate, drain, or disrespect, smart individuals don't engage in emotional tug-of-war. They don't argue endlessly or try to fix what's clearly broken. They simply draw a line silently if necessary, and refuse to allow that behavior to cross into their personal space. You see, setting a boundary doesn't always require confrontation. It doesn't mean yelling or making dramatic exits. It can be as simple as not replying to a message that feels like bait. It can be choosing not to pick up the phone when the caller is known for causing stress. It's the quiet decision to limit access without explaining yourself. Smart people know that toxic individuals often thrive on reaction. They want to provoke, to stir, to dominate the emotional climate. But when a smart person sets a boundary, they strip that power away. They deny the toxic person the very oxygen they feed on: attention and emotional chaos. This is not about being cold-hearted. This is about self-preservation. Smart people recognize that constantly tolerating toxic behavior teaches the other person it's acceptable. Every time you excuse the disrespect, you reinforce it. Every time you tolerate manipulation, you enable it. And smart people refuse to be complicit in their own mistreatment, so they act not with violence or anger, but with clarity. They make a choice to create emotional distance where respect doesn't exist. It's important to note that these boundaries aren't reactive, they're proactive. Smart people don't wait until they're broken to take action. They set the rules early. They observe patterns, not just apologies. They understand that someone's repeated disrespect is not a mistake, it's a message. So they don't wait to be pushed to the edge before standing their ground. They build their fences before the storm, not after it has destroyed everything inside. And when they enforce those boundaries, they don't negotiate. Toxic people will test your limits. They'll guilt trip, they'll gaslight, they'll play the victim. But smart people know that once a line is crossed repeatedly, words mean nothing, only actions matter. So they respond not with counterattacks, but with calm disconnection. They don't entertain the circus. They don't plead to be understood. They just walk the boundary they've drawn with unwavering consistency. And here's where most people go wrong. They think setting boundaries means others will suddenly respect them. But smart people know that setting boundaries isn't about changing the toxic person. It's about changing your own tolerance level. It's a declaration of what you will and will not accept, even if the other person never changes. That's the real power. You stop focusing on whether they get it. You focus on whether you're honoring your own self-worth. Setting boundaries also demands one vital skill: emotional discipline. Toxic people feed on your reactions. They want you defensive, flustered, uncertain. Smart people rob them of that victory by staying grounded. When someone crosses the line, they don't escalate. They enforce. They don't over-explain. They clarify. They don't try to justify their needs. They honor them. That's the difference between someone being controlled by toxic energy and someone who has reclaimed their emotional independence. There's also an inner strength in knowing you don't owe access to everyone. Just because someone has a title, family, friend, coworker, doesn't mean they're entitled to a front row seat in your life. Smart people evaluate behavior, not roles. If the behavior is toxic, the title is irrelevant. The boundary stays firm. And if pushback comes, as it often does, they see that resistance as proof that the boundary was necessary in the first place. Most importantly, smart people know that boundaries are not a one-time event. They're a lifestyle. Toxic individuals often creep back in through kindness, through guilt, through familiarity. But the smart ones remain alert. They don't get caught up in false hope. They know the difference between a changed person and a temporarily quiet one. They measure consistency, not empty promises. And because they value peace over approval, they're willing to lose relationships that demand they lose themselves. Smart people understand that reacting emotionally to toxic people gives away power. It gives the manipulator exactly what they want: access to your inner world. That's why they master the art of staying emotionally neutral. They don't let someone's chaos become their own. When a toxic person tries to provoke them with passive-aggressive remarks, blame-shifting, or emotional outbursts, they don't flinch. They observe, they process, but they don't absorb. Because they know the moment they lose emotional control, they become part of the game that the toxic person is playing. This emotional neutrality isn't about suppressing feelings, it's about managing them with precision. Smart people have trained themselves to recognize emotional traps before they step into them. When someone throws out a hook, trying to lure them into an argument, into defensiveness, into justifying themselves. They don't bite. They know that explaining themselves to someone committed to misunderstanding them is a waste of energy. So instead of trying to win the conversation, they win the moment by staying calm, clear, and centered. Toxic people thrive on emotional reactions. It gives them leverage. It feeds their need for control. They might insult you, twist your words, or play the victim just to see how far they can push you. But smart individuals don't give them the satisfaction. They understand the psychology behind manipulation, and they dismantle it not with aggression, but with stillness. Their lack of reaction is not weakness. It's a strategic refusal to validate toxic behavior. This calm posture also sends a message. I am not yours to control. I am not your emotional puppet. Smart people set the emotional tone of the interaction. They don't let the mood of the toxic person dictate their own. If someone is yelling, they speak slowly. If someone is accusing, they respond with facts, not feelings. If someone is guilt-tripping, they don't internalize that guilt. They reflect it back. They choose to be the thermostat, not the thermometer. They regulate. They don't react. One of the reasons this works is because toxic people are often confused by emotional neutrality. They expect fireworks. They want conflict, drama, a stage to perform on. But when the other person doesn't participate, the script falls apart. The manipulator has no direction to go, and that's when the power dynamic begins to shift. Smart people recognize that neutrality creates discomfort for the toxic person, but that discomfort is necessary. It exposes the toxicity for what it is, a desperate attempt for control, not connection. It's not always easy to stay emotionally neutral, especially when the toxic person is someone close. That's why smart people practice detachment, not from care, but from chaos. They might love the person, but they won't let that love justify mistreatment. They learn how to create internal distance. So even if the toxic person is shouting inches from their face, they remain psychologically and emotionally miles away. This kind of presence takes discipline. It takes self-awareness, but it's what allows them to keep their dignity intact in situations designed to strip it away. They also use silence as a weapon, not the kind of silence that punishes, but the kind that disarms. Smart people understand that not every comment requires a comeback. Not every insult deserves attention. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is say nothing at all. Not because you're afraid, but because you're beyond it. Because you've risen above the need to defend yourself against irrational accusations or petty attacks. In their silence, smart people speak volumes. I'm not playing this game. You don't control me. Your chaos ends where my peace begins. And even when they do speak, they do so with intention. No over-explaining. No begging to be understood. Just direct, composed, minimal words. They don't try to fix the toxic person. They don't try to heal them or convince them. They simply maintain their ground. That neutrality forces the toxic individual to face their own reflection. Because when you no longer react, the manipulator is left to wrestle with their own behavior. Smart people have learned through experience that emotional control is the highest form of self-respect. It's what protects them from being dragged into unnecessary suffering. It's what allows them to maintain clarity when others are lost in confusion. And it's what makes them unshakable in the face of manipulation, blame, or betrayal. They refuse to be a character in someone else's emotional drama. They write their own script, they choose their own tone, and they never let a toxic voice narrate their story. Smart people understand that control is an illusion when it comes to others. They don't waste time trying to fix, change, or manage toxic individuals. Instead, they focus their energy on influence, the only real power anyone ever has. Influence starts with self-control. When they walk into a room, they don't try to dominate the space. They regulate their presence, their tone, their energy. They know that toxic people feed off emotional chaos, so instead of matching that chaos, they project stability. They set the emotional climate by being anchored, not reactive. Trying to control toxic people only drags you deeper into dysfunction. The more you try to make someone treat you better, understand your worth, or behave the way you expect, the more frustrated and exhausted you become. Smart people don't fall for that trap. They don't try to rewrite someone's character. They observe behavior, they listen to patterns, and they respond accordingly, not by changing the other person, but by adjusting how much access they give them. This is influence in its most powerful form, shaping your environment by shaping your own standards. Toxic people want control. They want to dictate the tone of your relationships, the outcome of every conversation, the rhythm of your emotions, but smart people don't negotiate with that kind of energy. They redirect it. If a toxic person speaks in anger, they respond with measured calm. If someone tries to guilt them, they reply with clarity, not apology. If manipulation is used as a weapon, they disarm it through detachment. They've learned that you don't have to fight toxicity to win, you just have to stop feeding it.
Influence also means modeling the behavior you expect. Smart individuals don't ask others to respect them. They embody self-respect. They don't demand honesty. They speak with integrity. They don't insist on kindness. They show it consistently. They lead by example, not by argument. And when toxic people resist that standard, when they mock it, challenge it, or try to undermine it, smart people don't lower theirs. They hold firm, knowing that those who can't rise to meet healthy influence often remove themselves or expose themselves. Another layer to this is selective communication. Smart people choose their words wisely when dealing with toxic individuals. They know not every truth needs to be said, especially when the other person isn't seeking truth, but control. They speak with purpose. They ask questions that expose contradictions instead of hurling accusations. They listen more than they speak, not out of weakness, but out of strategy. The less you speak, the more the toxic person reveals. The more you listen, the more control you keep. Smart people also influence by not participating in emotional blackmail. When someone uses anger, silence, guilt, or pity to manipulate, the smart person doesn't bend. They recognize the tactic for what it is, and let it fall flat. That non-reaction is powerful. It sends a message without shouting. I'm not afraid of your disapproval. I won't trade my peace for your approval. I don't need your validation to feel whole. Toxic people don't know what to do with someone who can't be controlled emotionally, and that alone shifts the power dynamic. Influence is quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't seek attention. It's felt in the confidence of your silence, in the steadiness of your presence, and in the refusal to be baited into chaos. Smart people embody that influence by being consistent, by staying true to their values even when it's uncomfortable, even when they're misunderstood. They're not trying to be liked, they're trying to be aligned. And that alignment is what separates them from those constantly spinning in toxic cycles. There's also wisdom in knowing when to disengage. Smart people understand that their energy is currency. They spend it where it grows, not where it's drained. So when they see that their influence is met with resistance, when healthy behavior is mocked or met with aggression, they don't double down. They exit emotionally. They withdraw their presence. They stop giving explanations and start giving space. Influence isn't about forcing, it's about inviting. And if the invitation to grow is declined, smart people don't chase, they move on. At the heart of all this is emotional maturity. The realization that people change when they want to, not when you need them to. That's why smart individuals don't base their peace on whether others behave. They base it on how they respond. They don't build strategies around changing toxic people. They build lives that don't depend on toxic people. Their influence comes not from force, but from being immovable in their values, unshakable in their peace, and unwilling to be pulled into emotional games that serve no purpose but control. Smart people recognize that respect is not negotiable. It's not something you beg for, plead for, or work endlessly to earn from someone who refuses to give it. They understand that once respect is lost, truly lost, the foundation of any relationship, whether personal or professional, is broken. And when that happens, they don't try to glue the pieces back together. They walk away, not out of pride, not out of ego, but out of a deep understanding of their worth. They know that continuing to engage with someone who repeatedly disrespects them only teaches that person it's okay to do so. They have a clear line in their mind, and once that line is crossed, there's no long debate. They don't wait around hoping someone will realize what they've done, or magically change. They don't allow themselves to become emotionally entangled in cycles of apologies without transformation. They look at patterns, not promises. They assess actions, not intentions. They see clearly that someone who truly respects you doesn't need to be reminded repeatedly. They act with regard for your boundaries, your time, your voice. And when someone shows through consistent behavior that they do not, smart people don't try to justify staying. They choose peace over persistence. This ability to walk away is rooted in emotional independence. Smart people are not addicted to being liked, approved of, or accepted by everyone. They don't rely on external validation to define who they are. This makes them dangerous to toxic people, because toxic people thrive on control, on knowing that they can push your limits and still be accepted. But smart people remove that power. They don't wait for the other person to respect them. They walk when that respect is no longer there, knowing that silence in the face of disrespect is a form of self-betrayal. Walking away also requires courage, not the loud kind, but the quiet kind. The kind that allows you to choose loneliness over disrespect. The kind that says, I'd rather be alone in peace than connected in chaos. Smart people have that kind of courage. They're not afraid to end a friendship, leave a job, cut off a toxic family member, or remove themselves from any environment where they are being emotionally violated. They don't buy into the lie that walking away means giving up. They know that walking away is a choice made from strength, not weakness. This mindset is not developed overnight. It's usually forged through pain, through learning the hard way, what happens when you stay too long in places that hurt you. Smart people learn that giving someone endless chances doesn't make them kind, it makes them complicit. They learn that the longer you stay where you're not respected, the harder it becomes to respect yourself. So they make the hard decisions early. They nip disrespect in the bud, and if it continues, they remove themselves without looking back. There's a calm clarity in their walkaway strategy. They don't need to make a scene, they don't slam doors, they just detach. Quietly, firmly, and completely. Because they understand that you don't have to destroy someone to leave them. You don't have to make them hurt like you did. You just have to leave with your dignity intact. That is the ultimate statement. I don't need to win this argument. I don't need to change your mind. I just need to reclaim my peace. Smart people don't confuse forgiveness with access. They may forgive someone for being toxic or disrespectful, but that doesn't mean they welcome them back. Forgiveness is something they do for their own healing, not for reconciliation. They can forgive and still walk away. They can release bitterness without re-engaging in cycles of harm. They understand that love without respect is not real love, it's emotional bondage. And they refuse to be shackled by emotional manipulation, nostalgia or guilt. They also know that staying too long with someone who disrespects you will eventually wear down your sense of self. It will chip away at your confidence, your clarity, your peace of mind. So they make a conscious decision to protect those things, even if it costs them a connection. To them that's not a loss, it's a necessary step toward alignment, toward a life where they are surrounded by people who see them, hear them, and treat them with basic human decency. That is not too much to ask. That is the minimum standard, and if someone cannot meet that standard, they don't argue, they don't beg, they don't explain over and over. They leave with their soul intact, and their head held high. Smart people understand the power of selective exposure. They know that who you allow into your mental, emotional, and physical space can shape the direction of your life. That's why they're incredibly intentional about who they give their time and energy to. They don't entertain toxic people out of guilt or obligation. They don't stay connected to harmful individuals out of fear of being alone. They curate their environment with care, because they know that energy is contagious, and you eventually become like the people you surround yourself with. This isn't about being arrogant or self-righteous. It's about survival. Emotional, mental, and even spiritual survival. Smart people recognize that repeated exposure to toxicity is corrosive. It doesn't always destroy you in a single moment. It chips away slowly. It erodes your sense of self, your peace, your direction. One negative comment, one passive-aggressive jab, one manipulative guilt trip may seem small, but repeated daily, it becomes psychological poison. So the smart ones remove themselves before the damage becomes permanent. They don't wait until they're broken to create distance. They act while they still have clarity. They treat their space like sacred ground. They guard it with precision. Not everyone gets access. Not everyone gets a seat at their table. Smart people have learned that just because someone was in your past, doesn't mean they deserve a place in your future. Loyalty has a limit, and that limit is disrespect, dishonesty, and dysfunction. When someone brings consistent negativity into their life, whether it's subtle criticism, constant complaining, or manipulative behavior, they evaluate and adjust. And if the pattern persists, they create space, not to punish, but to protect. They also don't fear judgment for walking away. Smart people know that boundaries will offend the ones who benefit from you having none. They accept that being misunderstood is a small price to pay for peace. They're okay with people calling them cold, distant, or selfish, because they understand that true self-respect often gets misinterpreted by those who lack it. They don't live to be understood by toxic minds. They live to be aligned with truth. And if someone can't handle the fact that they won't tolerate abuse masked as love, then so be it. This mindset also frees them from the need to over-explain their decisions. They stop feeling the need to justify why they no longer respond to certain people, why they left certain group chats, or why they didn't attend certain gatherings. They don't owe toxic people closure. They owe themselves protection. And that understanding gives them strength. It liberates them from emotional guilt traps and manipulative apologies that come with no real change. They don't confuse apologies with transformation. Smart people wait to see patterns, not words. And if the behavior repeats, they step back even further. Another key element of selective exposure is controlling what they consume. Smart people know that toxicity isn't just in people, it's also in media, conversations, environments, and routines. So they cut out more than just relationships. They cut off gossip-filled spaces, drama-driven content, and emotionally draining habits. They filter what enters their mind like they would filter water they drink. Not because they're weak, but because they know the cost of mental pollution. They want clarity, purpose, and peace, and they know that can't coexist with a steady diet of negativity. They also use silence strategically. Smart people don't always confront toxicity head-on. Sometimes they simply go silent. No announcements, no confrontations, no final goodbye letters. They just stop engaging. Because they've learned that energy speaks louder than words. And when you stop reacting, stop showing up, stop feeding the dynamic, the message becomes clear: you no longer have access. That silence becomes a wall that toxic people can't climb. It's the sound of boundaries being enforced without noise. They build lives that toxic people don't want to be in. Lives filled with peace, direction, growth, and authenticity. Because toxic individuals don't thrive where there is clarity. They thrive in confusion. They thrive in emotional dependency. So smart people remove those variables. They build support systems based on mutual respect. They invest in relationships that add, not subtract. They spend time with people who inspire them to be better, not people who drain them until they forget who they are. This level of selectivity may seem harsh to those who haven't lived through the consequences of unchecked toxicity. But to smart people, it's not cruelty, it's clarity. It's knowing what they can and cannot afford emotionally. It's knowing that their goals, peace of mind, and self-worth are not up for negotiation. They are not willing to compromise their mental stability just to maintain a relationship that clearly isn't healthy. So they make cuts, they distance, they disappear. Not because they hate, but because they've finally learned to love themselves enough to stop bleeding for those who never learned how to heal. Smart people understand that the way toxic individuals behave is often a reflection of their own unresolved wounds, not a reflection of your worth. That's why they don't take toxic behavior personally. When someone lies, manipulates, belittles, or blames, it might feel targeted, but it's rarely about you. Smart people have trained themselves to separate identity from projection. They look past the insults and recognize the insecurity behind them. They look beyond the passive-aggressive behavior and see the fear driving it. This ability to depersonalize toxic behavior keeps them from internalizing pain that doesn't belong to them. It takes deep emotional maturity to witness someone trying to provoke you and still not absorb it. Smart people have learned to create an emotional filter, a kind of mental armor. When a toxic person tries to distort reality or play the victim, smart people don't try to fix it. They don't spiral into self-doubt or waste time wondering if they're to blame. They pause, they observe, they remind themselves, this is about them. Their behavior is revealing who they are, not who I am. That internal script protects their confidence and keeps their emotional clarity intact. Smart individuals have a strong internal compass. They've done the inner work to know who they are, what they stand for, and what they will not tolerate. That means when someone tries to gaslight them, they don't get confused. When someone tries to devalue them, they don't crumble. They measure themselves by their own truth, not by the dysfunction of others. They've moved beyond the need to be validated by people who are incapable of seeing their worth clearly. That detachment doesn't come from arrogance, it comes from peace. Toxic people thrive on making others feel small so they can feel big. But when their tactics no longer work, when their insults land on deaf ears, when their games are no longer effective, they lose their power. Smart people don't feed the dynamic. They don't engage in circular conversations. They don't try to prove their goodness to someone determined to see them as the villain. Instead, they stay grounded in self-awareness. They realize that not every attack deserves a defense, and not every lie needs correction. Sometimes the most powerful move is to keep moving forward, unshaken. There's also a deeper level of wisdom at play. Smart people understand that hurt people. That doesn't mean they excuse the behavior. It means they refuse to let it scar them. They understand that a toxic person's need to control, insult, or deceive is often rooted in fear, trauma, or emotional immaturity. So instead of internalizing that negativity, they view it with compassion, but also with boundaries. Compassion doesn't mean staying. Compassion doesn't mean tolerating abuse. It means understanding without participating. By not taking things personally, smart people protect their identity. They don't let someone's cruelty distort their self-image. They don't shrink themselves to fit the comfort of someone else's insecurity. They've built a strong sense of self-worth that isn't shaken by someone else's dysfunction. So when toxic people lash out, they don't feel the need to retaliate or defend themselves endlessly. They simply don't let that behavior into their psyche. They've already decided who they are, and that decision doesn't change based on who likes or dislikes them. They also understand that not every battle is worth fighting. When you take everything personally, you become emotionally reactive. You spend your days defending, arguing, explaining, and seeking closure. Smart people don't live that way. They understand that some people are committed to misunderstanding you, no matter what you say. So they save their breath. They choose peace over proving a point. They pick their battles carefully, knowing that their energy is better spent building the life they want, not fixing someone who refuses to be fixed. Smart people develop emotional detachment, not as a form of avoidance, but as a form of power. It allows them to stay focused on their goals even when people try to distract them with drama. It allows them to make logical decisions even when they're being emotionally provoked. They know that losing their temper or trying to win a toxic argument only drains them. So instead they breathe, they pause, they remember their worth, and they walk away from conversations that lead nowhere, arguments that serve no purpose, and people who refuse to evolve. They don't need closure from people who gave them chaos. They don't need apologies to find peace. Their healing doesn't come from the one who hurt them, it comes from within. That's the core of not taking things personally. It's choosing not to let someone's brokenness break you. It's deciding that you are not defined by the disrespect, the drama, or the dysfunction you encounter. You are defined by how you respond. And smart people choose to respond not with pain, but with wisdom, with stillness, and with the quiet strength of knowing who they are, and refusing to become what tried to wound them.